back to the Collective's Conversations. We're having conversations at the intersection of faith and life. I have Annie F. Downs on the show, and you guys know that this is probably a dream come true for me. I may retire from podcasting after today. Annie is the host of That Sounds Fun podcast and creator of the That Sounds Fun podcast network. Our friend Dave Barnes, who was on the show, is part of that network. She's a best-selling author, software speaker, and I think the queen of fun. I think we can give you that title.
I'll
Annie,
take it.
welcome to the show.
Thank you for having me, Jeff. And do not quit podcasting. We need your work in the world. So do not quit.
Okay. So I'll just quit today and start back tomorrow. I think I pastor. I quit every Monday. That's kind of how it works.
That's exactly right. I respect that. Yeah.
I've got to ask. You've been asking for 10 years everybody else's questions. So I want to ask you, for 10 years, you've been asking everybody what sounds fun to them. I want to know, Annie, what sounds fun to you?
Well, the fun part of answering that question is it can be big or small. You just never know what kind of answer you're going to get. But I was talking to a friend yesterday, and I have never been to Prince Edward Island.
Okay.
So I think it'd be really fun to go to Prince Edward Island and like see all the Anne of Green Gables things. So that's what's on my list today is I would love to go to Prince Edward Island.
So is there plans? Have you already started working on this trip or?
No, not currently, because my next trip is I am getting my 50th state this month. I'm finishing my last state and I'm going to Vermont. So that's kind of my like trip that is planned. And then I'll start. I'm not very good at planning trips when I have trips already on the docket.
Okay.
That are for fun.
Yeah.
Because my work requires so much travel. Very often, it isn't as fun for me to have fun trips on the calendar as well, because then it just looks like I'm gone all the time.
Yeah.
And so I kind of accomplish a fun trip and then I plan the next one. So Prince Edward Island is toward the top of the list.
So we got to ask, what is fun about Vermont? Like, I mean, other than syrup, maple syrup, right? But what else is going on in Vermont that you go and engage?
I don't know. I've never been. That's the trick, is it's going to be the last one I have not experienced. So I'm on a writing deadline. And so part of it, here's the rule, Jeff. If I get the book turned in before I go to Vermont, I get to be on vacation. If I don't get the book turned in before I go to Vermont, it's a writing retreat. So we will see what happens. The book is due that week.
So the calendar says vacation ?
Yeah. Well, currently it says write your book, and I'm just trying to get to the front side of it. In fact, I have a flight this afternoon or early evening, and I'm going to the airport as soon as I'm done with work and just going to sit. I write so well at the airport where I don't have other distractions. Like if I'm sitting at my house, I'll do my laundry or empty the dishwasher or do these other things, but not at the airport. So I'm going to go sit and chop out some words today.
So maybe we could talk to TSA and just get you like a TSA pass
right?
where you can go and work at the airport.
That's right. Or just buy like a one-way from Nashville to Atlanta that is $90.
Yeah.
And do that. Yeah. Listen, whatever it takes to get a book done, all of the authors are willing to do. So today it will involve some extra time at the Sky Club in Nashville.
Fantastic. So I want to ask, you've been doing your podcast for 10 years. I think I went back a couple of months ago to the deep recesses of Conversation One with Ted Decker. I think it was a 2-part episode, if I remember correctly.
I know, isn't that funny? Because they were both, I talked to him for like an hour, and back then you did not do hour-long podcasts, so I cut it in half.
No, so like now people are doing 3 hours and people are hanging on every word for 3 hours. But
that's right.
You've been talking to people for 10 years, and you've been sitting on this side of it as an interviewer. What do you think you've learned in that 10 years, maybe about yourself, about the Lord? You've had a lot of conversations. What's been maybe a lesson that stands out from your work as a podcaster?
Yeah. Over 10 years of That Sounds Fun, we have released and recorded around 900 episodes. And so that is a lot of conversations. Yeah. That's getting pretty close to my 10,000 hours of being on this side of the microphone. And because this is where I sit when I interview as well. I think the thing I've grown to appreciate about how God makes us uniquely for what we're called to do is my curiosity in other people had a lot of paths as I was growing up. Some of them are gossip. Some of them are like some of the unhealthy ones are gossip or being nosy or trying to know more than was my business to know. Now I'm seeing a path where God is using my curiosity about people to bridge my friends to the listening friends on the other side. So that's probably one of the main things I've learned is there was actually always a plan for my curiosity. It wasn't just something to be defeated as it was when I was a teenager early in my 20s. And I think the thing I've also learned is that what the listening audience wants is often what I want too. And so I can kind of trust my own instincts as I'm asking questions, because if a guest says, well, yeah, the last time I thought about that was when I was in Florida working at Disney World. And I want to be like, what? You worked at Disney World?
Right.
And because what I am betting is true is that the listener riding in their car on their way to work or picking up their kids is going, wait, that guy worked at Disney?
Right.
And so I follow my curiosity more than I follow the outlined questions.
Yeah.
Because that's what I think the listener wants.
I think I've learned that as well. It's kind of being an active listener and then engaging in the conversation, because you typically, and I've been a listener for a long time of your podcast and others, I'm going, yes, I want that. I want to know that too. Like I didn't know, whatever it was. And so, I mean, what our friends may not know, and so follow the conversation, is that you were a teacher prior to podcasting.
Yeah.
So I'll get to the question, but was there ever a moment you're in the classroom with littles going, hey, I want to sit behind a microphone the rest of my life? Or did you stumble into it?
No, because I taught school before podcast existed.
Yeah.
So there wasn't an outlet to dream of. I mean, that's something that right now, as people are being trained in education, one of the kind of mottos that is being said over and over is you are training kids for jobs that don't exist yet. And so in a lot of ways, I was practicing a skill set for a job that didn't exist, because I was curious about my students. I was curious about their families. I was funny and entertaining. I mean, one of the things I say a lot, you may have heard me say this, Jeff, is that I feel like God's kind of given me one skill set. I just have or one calling. There's just multiple expressions of it. Right. And so I have always entertained people until they learn something. It used to be fourth graders about the water cycle, and now it is Sunday mornings at Crosspoint Church when I'm teaching, or through the podcast, or through my books, or any of the other outlets like this. Like, I want to make people laugh, because then you can turn around and teach them something pretty easily. And so I have always been someone who entertained people in order to teach them. So I was practicing that long before I knew that podcasting would be a medium that would be so important to me.
Yeah. I have a unique story of how I got here as well. I went to college and I became a minister, went to college to be a minister. Before that, I went to state school for 2 years, and I was in broadcasting at state school. And so I sat behind a microphone in college radio. And then when God called me to ministry, I was like, I'm going to walk away from that. And then I remember the first time I have other podcast that we had for about 4 years. The first time I sat down behind a microphone, and I was like, this is like full circle, a moment that the Lord gave me, but it didn't exist 20 years ago. I had no idea I would do it in this form or fashion.
That's right. That's right.
But I like what you said, because the skill set of communication has always been there, right? Mm-hmm. Whether it's behind a microphone or preaching or teaching. I teach a class at the university. I love that. And it's like where I feel alive.
Yeah.
So was it something that when you first got behind the microphone, that first conversation with Ted Decker, it was like the light bulb went off and you're like, I'm alive doing this?
No, I don't think I felt that with Ted. Not because of him, but because I just didn't. He and I were not friends ahead of time. Okay. And so I was just nervous because I was such a huge fan. Right. And so I read all of his books. Couldn't believe I was getting to talk to him. But also yesterday in the chair across from me, Darlene Sheck sat here. And we talked about the 30th anniversary of Shout to the Lord, and I cried. I mean,
are they re-releasing it? Please tell me it's coming out.
Yes, dude. Yes. There's a whole album called Testament, and it is so many of her re-release. It's new songs and some re-releases, but Shout to the Lord's on it. Okay. And so that continues to happen to me, that I keep getting to interview people that are legendary in my faith life. And so I didn't feel this light bulb come on then. My clearest experience of that, I'll tell you, is I went to, our church did mission trips. This was in 2004, 2005. I was 23, something like that. Yeah. 24. Boy, when we get up here in the 40s, I would have never told you I couldn't remember my age. Now it's happening. It's ridiculous. So I was mid-20s, and I went on a mission trip to Scotland, and and I was one of the people who taught the sessions at the camp for students. And I'm telling you, there was one night where I taught, and I walked outside during ministry time, And I could tell we could go there right now if we could teleport. And I could tell you right where I was standing. And I said to the Lord, and I was teaching school at the time. I was in my 3rd year of 5 teaching. I said to the Lord, if there's any way you can make this my job, I don't know how this could be a job, but teaching people about you, like I know I've got the teaching skill set, but I didn't know there could be a job teaching people about you because at the time I didn't know any female pastors. I only knew male pastors, and I didn't want to lead a church. That's not my calling. That's not my anything. That's not me. I don't want to lead a church. Mm-hmm. And so I just thought, I said to him, if there's any way this can be a job, I would love this to be a job. And that was 2005. And by 2012, it was my job.
So I got to ask though.
That's 7 years, right? That's not a short amount of time. But now it's been my full-time job for almost 20 years, right? For 16, 15 years.
So I got to ask, because we all have wrestlings in faith and calling and that kind of
course.
stuff. When the Lord said yes, it could be your job, did Annie have a no? Like, was there ever like
He didn't say yes.
Are you sure?
I walked away. I walked back into that worship thing, not asking God for an answer, just asking him. And so I didn't stand there and go, is this a path we're taking? I just said, can I just ask you if there was any way that this could be this? Can I do it? And then I walked back in. And, but certainly, Jeff, I mean, the no's, I have a friend who just told me 2 days ago this story of, he said, when I put my feet on the ground every morning, I say to God, reporting for duty. And I thought, man, that would relieve me of so much of the pain I feel around God's no's to me. Yeah. If I just went reporting for duty because I love you and because you love me and because that's what we do. And that way the no's wouldn't be so painful. But yes, of course. I mean, my first book deal, Jeff, I got 47 no's.
It's like J.K. Rowling stuff, right? Didn't she get like
it's impossible. Yeah. It was, and it was in 2006 when and to 2009 when they still mailed letters to you of rejection, and I have all of them. And so it just kind of was like, oh, I'm never going to get to do this. Mm-hmm. And then God rewrote the whole story, and I did get to do it. But the no's were really important, Jeff, because I had moved to Nashville and was kind of saying to people like, I'm an author, I write books. I'm an author, I write books. And then no one wanted me to write books. And so I had to go through this real reckoning with my identity. And the Lord had to separate my identity from my job before he could hand me my job.
Yeah. So in the 7 years, I mean, because I know a lot of friends who are in their own 7-year stretch and maybe more, maybe less. What kept you going, I'm an author, I'm going to write books, I love to communicate, I'm going to communicate for the Lord, instead of going like, I'll just teach elementary school the rest of my life. And if it shows up, it shows up. What kept maybe that grit, that resilience, whatever you want to label it, of Annie going even when 47 letters show up?
Yeah. I think a couple of things happened. One of them is I didn't totally keep going. I mean, I kind of said, okay, if this is you closing the door, okay. And this other door opened. So this other door opened in 2011. So I'll put some more dates to it. I moved to Nashville and I wrote my first book that ended up being there was a Bible study for the high school girls at my church in 2006. At the end of that semester, one of the girls said, will you print one more and staple it like a book so I can give it to a friend? And I was literally like a book? Huh. And I was like, oh, did I just write a book? So that's kind of how that part of this started. Okay. So that was 2006. I went to my first writers conference in 2007 where I was like, and that lit me up. I was like, I picked a one-day conference in Atlanta. I lived in Atlanta at the time. Mm-hmm. And I thought, when I go in there, it will either be boring or it will ruin my life. One of these two things will happen. I'll either not care at all or I will want to give up my life. And about 2 hours into the first session, I was like, oh no, my insides are burning with a hot passion for being a writer. So that was 2007. I moved to Nashville in 2008. I signed with my first agent in 2009. Now, again, I'm ticking off these dates really quickly, but there are 365 days in between all of these. I signed with my first agent. I thought, here we go. Right. I was going to writers conferences and meeting with publishers, and that's when I'm getting all the no's. In 2010, when my agent and I broke up, because agents don't get paid until you do.
Right, so exactly.
So dear anyone who's paying your agent, that's not how it's supposed to be. Agents don't get paid till you do. And my agent and I were both like, this isn't working. As that door closed, Jeff, and as I kind of thought, well, I tried. I tried to do it. I called my parents and I said, can you fund me self-publishing this book up front? And then I'll pay you back as we make the money. But I had a pod at the time. I had a blog at the time. I had an Instagram following or a Twitter following. Instagram hadn't really kicked up hard yet. But I knew I could sell a couple of thousand books. And so we self-published at the end of 2010 and sold about 2,500 books.
That's
now, what I didn't know
self-publishing.
Right. I didn't know at the time was the average book traditionally published only sells 2,000 copies. So that happens. As that door closes, an invitation to move to Scotland opens. And so when you say, how did you hang on those 7 years? I didn't. I went where the open doors were. And the open doors were not in publishing or speaking or podcasting. The open doors were this church in Scotland that wanted me to come help plant a college ministry. And so I did that. I went there. And then then I felt God kind of invite me to like, okay, that season's done. I was there for about a year, start to finish. And I got home and I thought, well, how do I work with college students? I've loved it. So I met with a bunch of pastors and I met with a bunch of churches and I was just going where the doors were open. And I get a phone call that Zondervan wants to publish that book.
Oh, wow.
And I was
For friends that don't know, Zondervan's like cream of the crop, top of the top shelf.
Right. And at the time, Jeff, I was like, well, I don't know if I even want that life anymore. Like I gave all that. I genuinely gave all that up and moved to, and now I want to do college ministry, but what do we do here? So I went to my counselor and I went to my mentor and I went to some friends and I was like, what do we do? And everybody was like, you take the book deal, you dodo bird. What are you talking about? What do you do? Like you wanted to do this for forever. And, a book. So at the time, I'll tell you, it was 2011. It was a book for teenage girls. My advance was $7,000.
Wow.
So you can't live off of that.
No.
That's not like a job. And most book deals are not a job. They are meant to help you float the season you write the book. And that's it, which is why you see authors have podcasts and speaking gigs and side hustles and whatever. And when that book came out, I got invited to be on a tour, a speaking tour for teen girls. And so I spent the next 2 years, and then I was just tied to the front of a train, Jeff. So I spent the next 2 years traveling, speaking, and writing another book. And then the call came from Ted Decker's people because their PR person had seen me host a conference and had seen me interview someone on the stage and said, would you want to interview Ted? And I said, well, yes, I've read everything. Like I'm a major fan. I would lose my mind to interview Ted. Where do you want me to release it? And she said, and I said, I have a blog, but do y'all have somewhere you want to release it? And she said, have you ever thought about starting a podcast? And I said, that sounds fun. and I was like,
there's the name.
And that was it. And so then that became this other now, and still a decade later, that was 2014. We're at 10 years of podcast.
Yeah, that was early.
A decade later. Those are the three legs of the stool of my company. My speaking, when I travel and speak at conferences, events, and churches, the podcast, and the subsequent podcasts and the podcast network that we've created, and the books.
Yeah. So you're obviously enthusiastic about a lot of things, but the writing, like I've listened long enough, and I feel like we're friends, but we've known each other 18 minutes now.
I love it. No, I listen to your show too. I've listened to your show. Yeah.
And we have mutual friends. And so we've almost been in the same room, right? That's how podcasting works. The writing piece, when you talk about it, you just come alive. Now you come alive and you podcast. Are they distinct? Are they one and the same? Is one more prevalent in you than the other? Now you just posted on socials that you're trying to grind through this book. Yeah. That's coming out in February.
I do hate it. Yeah. It comes out in February of 26, Jeff, not even 25.
Oh, okay. Well, mark our calendars. Yeah. So, but is there one that is like, that's what I'm hardwired to do? So I'll speak for myself. I love to write, but I'm a speaker first. So are you a writer who speaks or a speaker who writes, or are both of those just merged and they just come out?
Yeah. So you're catching me at a funny time where I'm in the middle of doing a lot of speaking and I'm on a book deadline. And podcasting is an industry, as you all know, that is changing really rapidly. And it is not changing in a positive way for the majority of podcasters. It's making a way for some beautiful things. But in general, a lot of the legacy shows like mine are not having their best day. And we are having to adjust and change and make some decisions. And so where you're catching me on this exact day is I am weeks away from finishing a book this book deal I have with Revell. I love this publisher, and this is the end of this particular book deal with them. Mm-hmm. Well, I signed this deal in 2019. And so I have had homework for the last 6 years somewhere, right? Somewhere in my mind, I've had homework for the last 6 years. And so I'm also about 4 weeks from not having homework since January of 2019. And so some of what you feel of me loving writing is also like the end is here.
So you basically, you have a PhD in book writing right now.
Yeah.
6 years.
Right. Except none of it. I'm not smart enough to have a PhD in anything else. But I really love writing because I think people enjoy books, and I think it's a really unique way. And one of my grandmothers was a librarian. The other grandmother owned a bookstore. And so one of us was bound to be the one who made the books.
Yeah.
And so I'm really grateful. That being said, it is not natural for me to sit and type quietly in long form. That is a skill I've had to hone in order to share the messages I believe that God has for me to uniquely share with the world. It doesn't mean it's a message nobody else has said. It's just that my voice hasn't said it with my history. I'm sure you hear this all the time when people talk about writing, but someone in that post you're talking about, where I talked about how much I hate the book right now because that's part of the process, someone said, I stopped writing because what do I have to say that someone hasn't already said? And I was like, everything. We've never heard your story.
Yeah.
You should say, even if it's the exact same concept as any book I've written, we need to hear it from you.
Yeah.
And so to me, Jeff, when you say, are you a writer who speaks? Are you a podcaster who writes? I'm just an Annie who shares the things I love to share, and whatever medium that comes out in at the time is my favorite medium. So right now, book writing is my favorite because I'm jonesing on this thing. And like, I did 500 words this morning. I'm about to go to the airport and hopefully crank out a whole bunch more. I mean, I'm in the middle of it right now. And because it is my last one I'm contracted for, I don't know when I get to do this again. Okay. So I'm also kind of trying to go like, hey, you better love this because in a world where no one ever wants you to write a book again, this is the last one.
Yeah.
But speaking is great. I love entertaining people. I love being funny on a stage. I love talking about God. I love telling women to fast because it's a discipline that the enemy has tried to steal from women. I mean, give me a chance to tell people what to do and I'll take it, Jeff. I'll take it.
I feel the same way. So we may be like kindred spirits. I'm not a 7 when we talk Enneagram. I'm 2. So let me help you somehow. Like that's where I'm at. But our friend Ainsley Britton, your friend Ainsley and I, we're the exact same person sometimes. Like I've been on her show, she's been on my show, and I'm like, are we the same person? Sometimes I feel that way. I got into this by accident because my friend Rob and I love college students like you do. He was the campus pastor at Lee. I just love college students. We planted a church for college students. We did all this crazy stuff. And I said, Rob, let's write a book for college students about college students and college ministry. Why are they leaving the church? How can we get them to stay?
Yeah.
And we outlined the book, and I go, Rob, we don't have any of the answers to all the questions.
Wow.
And so I'm like, we got to talk to some people. And so we started reaching out to people. The first person we reached out to was Hayden Shaw, who wrote a book about generations. And I was like, we need to record this. Then I was like, maybe we could release it. And next thing you know, we're in podcasting, and we've had your pastor, Kevin Queen, and just 100 conversations later. And I'm like, I accidentally got into this because I thought I was going to write a book. And maybe we still will, but the conversations, I think, and Dave Barnes said this when I talked to Dave, it's really selfish to be a podcaster in the best way. Because you can go, hey, will you come talk to me for 45 minutes? And everybody who's listening on the backside, I've got all these questions for you. And it's
someone you're usually a fan of, right? Or someone you love their work or whatever. And you're getting like, I can't believe that's how I felt about Darlene Check yesterday. I was like, how did I finagle this?
Right.
How did I bamboozle the world into where I sit across from Darlene Check?
I've got no business talking to people I talk to, but I record it and release it, and people go like, hey, that's great. Are you friends with so-and-so? Yeah. We spent 45 minutes on a Zoom recording or whatever.
That's right. That's right.
So
that's right.
I feel like it's almost a positive selfishness. So with that in mind, in your 900 plus conversations, has there been somebody other than the Ted Decker conversation, you go, only the Lord and maybe that sounds fun got me in this conversation?
Yeah, I mean, I could list a pile of them. Beth Moore, any
Yes.
people like Beth Moore, CeCe Winans, John Eldridge. I mean, it's people that shaped my faith 20 years ago and 10 years ago and yesterday. It's people like that. So those kind of stand out to me.
We had the opportunity to talk to, we call her Aunt Beth because we spent an hour and a half on a podcast together. But
yeah.
I mean, she was just so gracious and amazing and said things, and you're like, you are so ridiculously smart.
Yes.
And
for the women and men of that generation, they were doing this job of writing books and speaking and not having to sit at a computer and talk to someone for 45 minutes. Like the way they have transitioned into our modern day of how we reach people is also so respectable and reminds me like maybe I should be doing TikTok, right? Maybe I should be doing what the next generation wants me to do because our mothers and fathers have done what the next generation needed them to do by coming on podcasts.
Yeah. I don't know. I tried TikTok. I'm not good at it.
I have no self-control is the honest answer, Jeff.
I've told
my team. Yeah, I've told my team, like, y'all can run Annie F. Downs. I can't have it on my phone because it is the one app that I cannot have control with. And so I can't have it.
Yeah, I agree. I struggle with that. Again, because I'm an Enneagram 2, and like we're gonna put this on the air. Like, and I feel like my gift to the kingdom is like, you should know this person because you're a musical fan, like I'm a musical fan, especially Christian music. Growing up in the era we grew up in, we won't name decades. Dr. Leah Payne, are you familiar with her?
Okay, no, I'm writing it down right now.
She is a professor at, I believe, Portland Seminary, George Fox out there. She wrote an academic book on the history of CCM music.
Oh, is it cool?
It is fantastic. And she's incredible. She went to Vanderbilt, so she's a Nashville person. She spent some time at Vandy. And I want to get this right. Did she work with Charlie Peacock? Somebody like that.
Everyone did.
I mean,
everyone works with Charlie
it's just
Peacock,
incredible. Like she documents the history of Christian music.
Oh, cool.
And I was like, Annie needs to talk to her. Like she was on my show and was great, but like,
I'll listen to that one. I'll put it on my phone for the flight. Thank you.
So she was fantastic. You said DC Talk, and because we had this whole conversation, because the first time I saw DC Talk was at the Cornerstone Festival, if you know what that is.
Yes, of course I do.
Michael Tate. It was Michael Tate with DC Talk, but Newsboys were there with Peter Fuller, and I was like a 15-year-old kid going nuts in this cornfield.
I get it.
So anyways, you are doing something that is unique, and I want to transition this. And I don't have the word. Maybe let's coin the word and trademark it so we can both make money off it. Okay. You're living in Nashville, living in New York. I call it bi-residential. Is there a better word?
Probably, but I like that. I jokingly say I have dual citizenship.
Okay.
Because they are so different. It's like two different countries, right?
Yeah.
I'm living both in Nashville and New York currently.
So what led to that? Why'd you make that choice?
I've been in Nashville for 15 years. New York has always been interesting to me. I genuinely believe the line that says, if you can make it there, you can make it anywhere. Mm-hmm. And I love, this is going to sound so stupid maybe, Jeff, but I love challenges like that. If someone says, if you can make it there, you can make it anywhere, I kind of want to go, bet, I'm in, And so that's part of it. I think I'm asking myself this question a lot now too, as I'm deciding what happens for 2025 and what's the next step of this. And what does this transition at all? Does the amount change at all between the two cities? It will if I marry somebody in one of the places. So I've also opened up my dating pool by 1.5 actually, because New York's so much bigger. But I think part of why I'm doing it is my personality loves new challenges, and I can stay in the challenging mundaneness of a life I have because maturity says deep roots are beautiful and good. I have learned how to stay. I am really energized by new. Right. And this has allowed me to have both. Like I'm still staying in my community. I'm still in my book club. I still teach at Crosspoint with Pastor Kevin. I'm still very invested in the people I mentor and disciple. I'm still discipled by someone here. And I have a new community and a new city and so I'm able to do both for now until I can't. I don't know when that'll be, but for now they are both, they are both growing me pretty significantly. I said to a friend yesterday, Jeff, it's a new friend that I have just met, and I said, "You're meeting the best Annie available. I've never been this great at it as being an Annie as I am right now, and that's all because of New York." And because of how New York has grown and stretched me, it's benefiting every corner of my life. Yeah. And I couldn't have imagined that.
So in the concrete jungle where dreams are made of, right?
Yes.
What has bloomed out of this Annie? What has come to life out of this Annie?
Oh, man. I mean, some of it is female centric, which may be weird to talk about, but I'll do it anyway because we're friends. New York offers you to be beautiful, whoever you are. Mm-hmm. If you just walk down the street and think you're cute, you're right. And everyone does it. And so there's been a real confidence thing that has happened in me that people notice. People say things to me and I'm like, oh, it's because I walk down the street in New York now. And so that's part of it. There's been a lot of like like appreciating everyone else, but that means me too. Like thinking everybody is great, that I pass by on the street and everybody has a story and everybody matters and everybody's beautiful and everybody's there on purpose and everybody's strong for being there. But all that is true of me too, because they're looking at me. And so I think some of that has really changed. I think watching God and what he is doing in Nashville and watching what God is doing in New York has been really interesting. I'm plugged into faith communities in both places. And so I hear preachers teaching to each church uniquely. I hear the work they put their hands to is unique in both places. The things they believe God's doing in their city is different in both places. And that is all really fun.
Right.
That's all really fun and unique. And so I think I love that part. And I just love the walking around, the physical health of like being a moving person and the mental health. My mental health is so much, my brain is so much clearer every day because I spend 20,000 steps on accident because I'm just getting from here, there to everywhere. But when I walk, my brain, it's like kind of how my brain dumps is when I walk. And it's just been it's been a real gift in every way. It's also been incredibly hard, Jeff. I mean, there have been parts that I've been like, repeatedly, I've said, why did you do this? You didn't have to do this. Yeah, it didn't have to be this hard. So it has not all been roses.
At this stage of my life, I don't even like staying in a hotel overnight sometimes. It's just like my whole rhythm's off. Like I love and I love visiting a city, right? I love walking around and seeing things, but like the hotel, like that's not my bed. That's not my pillow. That's not, but it's interesting because you mentioned the faith communities. Podcasting, everybody's in Nashville in the Christian industry. They're writing books, they're pastoring churches, they're nonprofits, whatever. But I've also had the opportunity to speak to like John Tyson, who's in New York City, staying in New York City, loves New York City. And God's doing something both places that's both the same and different.
That's exactly right.
How have you seen that expressed?
I think, well, I'll tell you a big difference is there is a part of Nashville where it really benefits you to be a Christian. Mm-hmm. It benefits you socially. I mean, when I moved here and would like, all my friends would go to a bar and you meet someone new and his first question was like, where do you go to church? And I was like, what is happening? Wait, what? And now listen, of course, Christians go to bars. Me too. That's not what I'm saying. I just didn't know it was so ingrained in the social culture here. And it is, and it benefits you. It advances you. And it professionally advances you here to be a Christian. It does neither of those things in New York. And in fact, the people who have committed to Christ in New York are pushing against the tide. They're not enjoying the benefits of the tide. And so that's been the main difference I've seen but in both places, the pastor is getting up on Sunday and saying, do you know who Jesus is? In Nashville, it is, do you know who Jesus is? Like, are you sure? Or have you been a Christian your whole life?
Exactly.
Like, are you actually committed to him? Are there disciplines in your life? Are you sacrificing? Are you tithing? Are you giving? Are you fasting? Are you praying? Like, are you doing this? And in the North, I won't draw those lines.
Okay. I'm from Chicago.
Nashville,
so it's the same.
In Nashville and New York is the only two I can talk about. In New York, what I'm hearing the pastor say is like, hey, you may be new to hearing about Jesus. Let me actually tell you who he is. Now, for those of you who are here, we will only survive this if the disciplines are in our lives.
Right.
You will only be able to live and grow and flourish if your life has the spiritual discipline. So it's almost like the same message being taught, but for two different reasons.
To two completely different audiences. and that's
right.
part of it.
That's right. That's right.
Yeah, I grew up north of Chicago, and so I remember my kids live here. We live in Southeast, about 2.5 hours from Nashville, and so it's Christian hubbub here. My kids have all Christian friends, all Christian, quote unquote Christian friends, and they go to See at the Pole, and there's a couple hundred kids there. I went to See at the Pole that I think my high school was 5,000. There were 7 of us.
Yeah.
Like it's just different.
Right.
And I'm like, you guys,
different.
It's such a blessing to you guys, but it's not going to be a blessing forever because there's a resistance and resilience that comes when you have to struggle with faith and be an outsider in the community.
Yeah.
But right now I love it because my kids are sheltered and they're protected and they're high schoolers and finishing that. And so I understand the tension of like in New York, you have to be a Christian. You have to live that out.
Yeah.
In Nashville, it's beneficial to be a Christian. Like
that's right.
So
that's right. That's right. And in both places, God is drawing people closer to himself. That's the best part is he's drawing people who have never met him. I mean, our whole country is not what it was a decade ago, as far as faith being an important part of culture, or 2 decades ago. So Nashville is not all Christian by any stretch, and New York is not all non-Christian by any stretch. It's actually they joke that there's this little set of about 5 streets on the Upper West Side that is the Bible Belt, because so many people that go to the same churches all live kind of in the same area. So they're like, oh, that's the Bible Belt, of course, So it's happening. But what the reality is that we're in a time in the world where God is drawing people closer to himself so that we will be strong when the world is hard. Or at least have a place to go when the world is hard. And I'm seeing that in both cities.
Yeah, I agree. It's so I applaud your bravery for doing both. So, but you are the champion. You mentioned your singleness, and you made that well known. And you're the champion of singles in the body of Christ. And I think you're also the champion of the Single Purpose League, which you created. If there is a champion, is there a champion in your league? Like, is it like fantasy football? Is there like a?
Yeah, that's right. That's right.
What in the church we don't get it right, and I admit that as I've been in pastor ministry. What do we get right with singles in the church, and what could we do better with?
Well, let me tell you why we've gotten here. What's happened is that, in my observation, is that a lot of the men, and it's mostly men, it's some women, but a lot, let's lean on what is the majority. A lot of the pastors got married when they were 20, because to be a lead pastor, there is a overarching belief that to climb the ladder in a church, you have to have a wife and you have to have a family. That's true. Yeah, I don't know if it's overtly said, but it is covertly understood.
Oh, it's overtly said. It is.
Yeah, there you go. And so for a lot of my peers, I'm 44, a lot of my peers who are leading churches now, they got married when they were 20 to 22, and then they went to seminary with their wife, and they lived in a tiny apartment, and then they started leading churches. Well, in seminary 20 years ago, there was not a class. I don't know if there's a class now. Y'all didn't take classes on how to pastor singles. No. And so here we are 20 years later, and 40% of your church most likely is unmarried today, whether that's never married, divorced, or widowed. And the pastors have all my sympathy and all my cheers, because you haven't lived this and no one trained you how to deal with this. And so, of course, absolutely, of course, it's like if horses started going to church. You'd be like, well, I've never been a horse and no one taught me how to get horses saved. Right? Like for Christian singles to expect our pastors to know how to pastor us exactly the way we need in 2024 is unfair.
Yeah.
And so what I want you to know, Jeff, and what I want your pastor friends listening to know is what I am saying to singles all the time is get helpful in your church. Quit chirping. Like, instead of telling the church what they're not doing to serve you, start fixing it, because they do not know. Meet with your pastor, meet with some staff. In fact, we'll get this to you, Jeff, but because I'm having a lot of these conversations with pastors right now, I'm in a really unique seat because I am a single woman. And I'm also ordained at my church, and I teach on Sundays. So I am one of the handful of us that are a pretty small handful that are straddling pastoring and singleness. Right. Right. And being a female on top of that. So we've actually created a resource called Pastoring Singles that is just free. We just started realizing that pastors so deeply want to pastor their singles well and don't know how. And singles, when we ask singles in our single purpose league, we have 2,000 people in single purpose league currently. We did a survey, and of the people that responded to the survey, we said, do you feel supported by your church? And overwhelmingly, they did not. But listen to this. You're going to love this, Jeff. When we said, where do you want to meet someone? Of the top 10 answers, 4 of them had to do with church gatherings. And so what single Christians want is, I really want to be part of my church. I want to be supported in my church. I want to be supportive in my church. I don't think that's happening in some ways today. Yeah. But I was so encouraged when they answered both of those things, because it said, we're still showing up and we're still there and we still hope to meet someone there, but we don't necessarily feel super supported. And what I'm trying to say to the singles is, like, we're telling pastors as best we can how to help singles. You have to be helpful too. They cannot know what your life is like. You and I share a lot of things. You don't know how to date in 2024.
Oh, no, please. No.
Right.
I wouldn't want to. So, like, no offense. I don't want to.
That's right. That's right. Guess what? Me neither, bro. So, but here's the thing. When you teach on sexuality at your church and you teach on sexual purity, you've got to teach married people what sexual purity looks like after they get married. And you've got to teach single people what sexual purity looks like when you're not married. Yeah. And one of the problems is, I think we were taught that was a thing, like once you got married and crossed that finish line, that then it would be fine. And that sets up young adults for thinking marriage is the only finish line. Right. And instead go, no, sexual purity is your whole life, guys. It's your whole life. It just is whether you're sleeping with someone or not, whether you're married or not.
Or other avenues. I mean, we know the pornography issue is an issue. There's so many things that in the sexual purity conversation that are beyond just your marriage and your marriage bed. Like,
so I'm not sure pastors have done anything wrong on purpose. I think so when you teach on Sabbath, here's another example. When you teach on Sabbath, often pastors say, turn off your phone and be with the people in your family. And I live by myself. I love observing Sabbath, but I cannot turn off my phone. That is not safe. And that is incredibly isolating. So when pastors are teaching about Sabbath, if you have a single person who sits on your advisory committee, if you have a single person that you pop your outlines by, if you have a single person who teaches, and all you say is like, hey, if you're single, here's the other thing you can do. Instead of get this little stand off of Amazon and put your phone on it to charge during the day, but leave it on. Or come over to our house and do Sabbath with us. Yeah. You know, like, there's just these ways that you can mold your teaching with one extra sentence that will make the 20 to 40% of the people in your congregation who are not married go, my church totally sees me. Yeah. They may not know what to do with me. They may not know how to build events for us, but he just said that Sabbath is different if you're not married. And I've never heard anybody say that. Yeah. And it goes so far, Jeff. It goes so far when we are just mentioned and considered, which is true it's how men feel. It's how women feel. It's how people of different races feel. It's how teenagers feel when you go, hey, if you're still in school, here's how you Sabbath. Kids go, my pastor noticed that and so
I think we all want to feel seen, Annie. I think that's, and I think when we talk singles and you're expressing it so greatly for us is we just have to help them feel seen in the church.
Yeah, that's it. I'll tell you this quick story that happened with the church I know, where they decided to do a staff family day at the zoo. Great. Love it. They should. I think it's great. All their communication to the staff was it's a family day. All the singles got tied in knots about it. Here's what happened. The singles told nobody and they just didn't show up. All they had to do is one person had to go to the pastor running the event and go, hey, are we invited too? And he would have said, oh my gosh, of course you're invited. It's for the whole staff. We're just also saying, bring your spouse and your kids. All the church had to do, all that pastor had to do was say, hey, it's family day at the zoo. And we mean every one of you. And we want you, whether you're married with kids or not, we want you and your kids to come. But if you're not married and you don't have kids, or if you're married and don't have kids, you're all welcome. It took one sentence from each side and it would have fixed it. And so I am like, listen to how passionate I get about it, Jeff. I
can feel it. Almost as passionate.
This is what I ride at dawn for right now is like, I want pastors to feel supported by singles, and I want singles to feel supported by pastors. And it usually takes 1 to 2 sentences. And so that's why, I mean, we'll send you the link and you're welcome to share it. And
awesome.
And it is a free guide. We'll even, whatever you want. It's just a free guide that we went like, here's some questions you can ask and just get a single up close to you, divorced, widowed, or never married. And let's see how true it is that everybody actually wants to help the other one. Cause I think that's what's true.
Yeah, I think so. Well, you're celebrating 10 years of That Sounds Fun. So I got to ask, what's next for Annie F. Downs? And That Sounds Fun.
Yeah.
What's ahead?
Jeff, I'm gonna spoil some things here. I'm going to tell you some things I haven't.
For the tens of listeners.
Yeah. Hey, listen, who cares? You could have a gazillion. I went out to LA a couple of weeks ago for some meetings about doing a more substantial video version.
Okay.
So there's some opportunity to do, more video.
Video's winning big time right now.
Yeah. So there's some companies that want to work together and create a new thing. And that's really exciting, but it'd be under the That Sounds Fun umbrella. We are really turning in 2025. The That Sounds Fun podcast is going to disciple people pretty intentionally next year.
Wow.
I
love that.
I feel like we're in a season of, I feel like it's time to disciple. I think up close discipleship where you sit across the table from each other is the best.
100%.
The second, that's the best version. Mm-hmm. I can't do that with all of our listeners, but I can put a podcast in their ears and let them take that to their mentor or the person they're mentoring.
That's good. I like that.
So next year's focused on discipling through some pretty specific content. And then with Single Purpose League, I mean, it is for any Christian who is not married today to join. And we are talking about how do you live on purpose? And it is mostly female. I will tell you that we serve significantly more females than males. Have you had Ryan Weckenman on yet? Do you know him?
I don't know him. Ryan.
Great pastor from Red Rocks, Austin.
Okay.
Not married. He has a book called Single Today, and he's really serving men and women even better than I'm able to serve men. Though I love dudes, obviously I want to marry one of them. But the thing about, so Single Purpose League and that community, kind of our content for the next year is also around the big question we're asking with Single Purpose League is, what is your purpose while you're single and what's your single purpose?
Yeah. Because
our single purpose ain't going to change.
Yeah.
And so those are the things we're kind of doing in the That Sounds Fun world next year and continuing to grow the network. And right now our network team at That Sounds Fun Network is able to support about 35 podcasts with community and advertising. Yeah. And so we're going to continue to find more shows that we feel like share our backbone and want to make space for advertising and want to make space for community. And so that's a really fun other company to be a part of.
I love the discipleship thing.
Thanks.
I don't want to take, I love the church. So it's not a knock on the larger church. I just don't know that we've been discipling well in the church sometimes. And I feel like it's such a need. I work with young adults and they're crying out for someone to invest in them. They're hungry for someone to make a deep investment in them. They are content consumers. They listen to your podcast, my podcast. They listen to all these sermons. They've got everything on repeat. But what they really want is somebody to step into their life who's like half a step, 2 steps, 3 steps ahead of them going, hey, let me walk with you. My wife and I just had an interesting conversation about this very idea that in the church, men seem to do it better than women do it. And I don't know if that's as true across the board, but what we've seen, we're talking with our daughter, we have 2 kids left in the house, daughter 17, son 16. He had a young man step in his life and said, let's meet for coffee. And I was asking my daughter and she goes, I don't know anybody in the church who would be willing to say that to me. And so, so I'm wondering if maybe it's just a situation where we need to call men and women to step up and walk with somebody. I don't have the data to back that up. But it's interesting that was sort of the anecdotal story that maybe we need some women.
Did you see the New York Times article all about how men are coming back to church? Gen X men are coming back to church at a rate that is far surpassing women. And so I do think there's something to that. I think we're in a unique time where you and your peers, as my peers that are males, you and your peers have really noticed a gap that you experienced, and y'all are about filling that gap.
We're trying.
You and Tyson and Comer. And I mean, there's a bunch, Bethke, there are a bunch of y'all that are very much like, I mean, I'm thinking of one of our pastors here named Josh Reed at Crosspoint, who is just like, we're filling that gap. What we experienced, we will not let the next generation experience. And so I think that's what you're seeing is what your daughter is experiencing is we are an age group of women who went to a lot of Bible studies and we thought that was discipleship. And our moms went to Bible studies and thought that was discipleship. And y'all didn't. And so y'all felt the loss of meeting that one-on-one that we didn't feel because we were at a table watching Beth Moore teach. And y'all weren't. And so I'm curious to watch how we come back into that discipleship place. But I'm also forever talking, you've heard me say, I'm forever telling people like, who's your mentor? Who's your therapist? Who are you discipling? Like it's got to be that face-to-face-ness.
100%.
I think.
Okay. Well, I know you are busy with all the things fun. So I've got one final question for you. And since the show is titled...
thank you for having me. This is really, really fun.
I've loved every minute of it. The show is titled The Collective's Conversation. So who's one person, and I know there's already 1,000 conversations with you, but one person, historical, present day, fictional, or in your real life that you want to sit down and have a conversation with?
Man, I would do anything to record a podcast with each of my grandmothers who passed away, both of them 20 years ago.
Okay.
I think when I think about who got me here, and, like there's always a praying grandmother, right? There just seems to always be a praying grandmother. And there are so many parts of their stories that now that I'm an adult, I wish I knew that you don't know to ask as a kid.
Yeah.
And so I hope we get to podcast in heaven. I hope there's still some sort of interview way that people get to be a part of. And either way, I look forward to talking to them again, but I particularly would love to have recorded content with them here. And so that's who those are the first two I would call given the chance.
I have this, and I'll share this and we'll close. That's a good pastor statement, and we'll close, right?
Well done. You got the skill set.
I have this 3-minute video. My grandfather got dementia late in life. He was in a nursing home, assisted living place. And the last visit I had with him, I took my phone out and I said, "Grandpa, what would you like to say to the people?" And he went on for like 3 minutes. And this was maybe a decade ago. And I have that video still of my grandfather sort of sharing something. He was a retired pastor. And it's one of those treasured digital memories that I will never let go of. So I 100% get that. So Annie, to be in completely cliche, this has been fun. So
I'm so good. Thank you. And thank you for letting me talk about all those different things. Like we really covered a good gamut of what matters most to me. And that is really kind of you, Jeff.
I loved it. And you're always welcome. And as we say here at the Collective's Conversation, you've always got a seat at the table. Thanks for being a great guest.
Thank you.
Wow, what a great conversation that was. Thanks for joining us in the conversation. If something from the conversation really stood out to you, would you share it and tag me on social media at Jeff_Pitts_ on Instagram? And we would love it if you would rate and review and subscribe to the show. That just helps us reach more people with these great conversations. And as we always say, you've got a seat at the table. Thanks for joining the conversation.